Well, if you like true crime, you're probably going to love this. This is Flashback Perspectives. I'm Instructor Thompson in my self-defense studio. This is our podcast and vlog on real violence and remembering, flashing back to the perspectives that we had during and after real violence, real attacks have occurred. My guests, and some of them are instructors, some of them are martial artists, many of them, well, they all wear many hats, but they live in the polite society that we do today. Except for when polite society breaks down, that primal comes out, things change. Our perspective then is different than how we think it might happen. Our perspective after is different than during, and our perspective long after often starts to change a little bit then too. Please, if you enjoy the series, listen and learn vicariously the best way, because the price has already been paid. It's been paid in full and often paid in blood. Up next in Flashback Perspectives, we have Instructor Brian Cannata. Brian Cannata is known as an FMA instructor in hedged weapons, but in our interview here, we learn it's not his primary, which I don't know that a lot of people will see coming, because I didn't. Moreover, we go over some very important lessons and a lesson that his student had learned. And thanks to his help, she was able to survive. But deeper than that, we go into the psychological and a lot of the very important things that you want to know about what happens when real violence occurs. You should know there is help out there. In this episode, we're going to be sharing some resources. If you've experienced real violence or are affected by any of these things, you should reach out and get some help. And I understand some people, money's the issue, but there's free help out there too. Just talking with people can very much so be beneficial. If you think that you're alone in these experiences, or that something that you experienced was not normal, I would wager you'd be surprised. Not a lot of people will understand, except for people who've been through it, and there is help out there for you. With that, please enjoy Instructor Cannata's interview and help learn the lesson that he teaches us here. Enjoy the interview. Salud.
Hi, everybody. My name is Brian Cannata. I am, among other things, a self-defense instructor. I teach a number of systems. Mostly these days, I'm focused on two primary systems. One is called Medusa. The other one is known as Piper. They're both knife-centric systems, and I think they have a really good place in most people's self-defense program. That being said, as much as I do edged weapons, my personal primary focus is actually I'm a firearms guy. And what we're talking about here is an incident that happened quite a long time ago. The person that was involved in it has since passed away, so I feel pretty comfortable talking about it. She was an older lady. She was in her 60s. Yeah, she was in her 60s or early 60s, but she had severe macular degeneration. Now, for those of you out there that don't know exactly what that is, if you take your hands and you put them here, this was her vision. All right, a little bit of peripheral vision. She could kind of see things by moving her head around. She could function, but for all intents and purposes, she was blind. She was really worried about how her neighborhood was shaping up. And she came to me for some training. She wasn't going to fight her way out of it. She was too old, she's too frail, couldn't see, a lot of physical problems. You know, I'm not going to teach somebody like that Filipino martial arts and, So we looked at what she was worried about, and ultimately we decided that a firearm would probably be her best choice. Now, I know you guys watching out there are going, blind person, firearm? What the? Understand that we designed the training for her to use a firearm based on contact distance, not shooting on a flat range. Oh, let me grab a trainer. Everything we were training was shooting from retention, where she could be touching the target, where she could be pressing that muzzle into the target. And for simplicity of operation, she got a revolver. Simplest firearm out there to use. None of the problems with automatics. So we spent a good bit of time at the range working on how to do this. And she became quite effective. One evening, she had gone to bed, woke up with a knife to her throat, and the neighbors, I believe it was their son, but adult son, had broken in and decided that he was going to do horrible things to her. She had a bunch of yappy little dogs. They were barking up a storm. And he told her to get rid of the dogs. He got her up out of bed. She's in her nightgown. He's got a knife to her throat. You know, get rid of the dogs, get the dogs out of the room. In the process of doing that, while he was, it's dark and can't really see what's going on, she smartly picks up the revolver and is basically holding it in Sewell, even though she didn't really know what that was. I'm not even sure I knew what that was at the time. I just considered it close retention. Got the dogs out. He turns her around to start doing what he wants to do to her, and she punches out, puts the revolver against his chest, pulls the trigger once. His response was, and I quote, "Oh fuck, you shot me." Whereupon he ran out of the house, and they found him in somebody's backyard. One of the things I really like to talk about in this story is that no matter how old you are, and no matter what your personal challenges are, if you find a competent instructor, they can find ways for you to be able to defend yourself. They can take concepts, they can mold them, and they can adjust them, and they can fit them to you. If somebody's out there telling you, oh, you're too this, you're too that, don't listen to them. Go find somebody else that'll work with you. The downside of this story, though, now, luckily, both people survived. She didn't get abused, and the EMTs were able to heal him or save him, get him to the hospital in time. The psychological damage that she carried for the rest of her life from pulling a trigger on another person is something that we don't talk enough about. And if you are dealing with somebody that is training you for self-defense, you really need to talk to them about the repercussions, the psychological repercussions. There's a saying in the gun world that if you shoot somebody, you fight 3 battles. You fight the battle where you draw the gun, you fight the battle while you're in court, and then you fight the battle with yourself for what you did. Now, some people are like, whatever, he deserved it. And then they sleep happily every night, and they don't think about it. And then others, even though they were perfectly justified in defending themselves, it wrecks them emotionally. And that's something you need to think about. And you need to realize that if you were involved in one of these situations, there's a good chance you're going to be carrying emotional baggage for the rest of your life. And,
Absolutely.
PTSD is not just for soldiers. And, she was a very lovely lady. Funny as hell. But, this happened to her. And it could just as easily happen to you. And this is the stuff we train to deal with. So,
that was fantastic.
That's really the point I like to make with that.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that so much. And that story was fantastic. The more I thought about the questions that we typically go through for this, some of them have application, but I think, almost more so on the other side. Can you talk about the varying types? So I got to experience myself a secondhand PTSD version of almost a survivor's guilt, but also an instructor's from my student did not survive. As everybody knows, you have the post-traumatic stress disorder of, what soldiers experience, like you talked about, but I didn't learn until later and had gone into a meeting that there is multiple different types of these types of things. And, not necessarily what the effects of the brain are specifically, but how these things can manifest in your life. Have you seen them, manifest in different ways for different people?
Yeah, I mean, it does. It does. You could, I'll give you a good example. How these sort of things can affect you. I'm friends with a number of people in various special operations communities. This group of people together have probably killed more people than smallpox. They're genuine operators. They've been out there, they've seen the elephant, they've done the job. Some of them, it's nothing to them. Now, mind you, these aren't cold-hearted killers or anything like that. Yeah, they're loving parents. They've raised fantastic families. It did not psychologically affect them. They were able to process it through the fact that they were doing a job. They were doing their duty for their country. That allowed them to process those emotions. Others crawled into a bottle and took years to get out of. Lost them marriages, children, damn near their life a couple of times. Until they got the help to help them process it. And how you process it is going to depend so much on you and how you feel about these things. And it's really hard to say to yourself, I'd be fine doing such and such to so-and-so because, I'm a red-blooded, meat-eating, gun-toting American. But until you do it, you don't know. You do not know. And that's the thing. Number one, you got to be psychologically prepared to do it. And then when you're done, you have to be prepared to deal with the aftermath of it. And
very well said.
As this we need to talk to more about, with our students. And mind you, I'm not talking about kiddie karate classes. I'm talking about adults that are going to be in situations where they might have to take another human being's life.
Absolutely. But I think there's a big disconnect in a lot of martial arts training, and that, swinging and we're, doing this punch, and that punch was crushing a man's nose in, and, blood goes everywhere and his head slams back up against a wall. And the reality of what that looks like versus I'm training it in a class, because, cardio kickboxing and some great things that you can go do, but it's very rarely imagined in that way till it's done. So, and some of these things, one of the reasons I wanted to do this series was because you almost never know until after. And you put that very, very well. It's the aftermath and how it's going to affect you, how it went down. We imagine these things a certain way, and then it's almost never that exact way. There's almost always differences. Mm-hmm. And then how you internalize it. And it doesn't even just, and from what I've seen, it doesn't it doesn't even just have it where, these are feelings. These things can manifest in your actions and your behavior, in how your general view on life goes. You wake up angry every day,
Yep.
and every, to even sporadic times where you just break down in tears and you don't know why. And, that's why I think that therapy is a huge thing, but not everybody. I think everybody should go through it and try it and see if they can, because especially in America, we live in this culture where there's this huge sense of ego, and guys are going to be tough, and we're going to rub some dirt in the wound and stand up, and not supposed to be showing emotion like that. And, that kind of thing's really unfortunate.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah. The psychological effects of the things we're discussing are far deeper than what we can even just bring up in this little conversation. And God forbid you have to do something like this to somebody else. Please get some kind of counseling. Please, please, please. Because you will find that you're lashing out at your loved ones. You will find that you're overreacting to the simplest things. There's personality types out there where something will piss them off and they just push it down, and then they push it down, and then they push it down, and then they push it down. And then one day the milk is empty, and, then all of a sudden they explode. And it was never because the milk was empty. It was because of all that crap they pushed down before. And, when we're talking about self-defense, you might be pushing that stuff down. Yeah. And even if you don't actually kill somebody in a self-defense situation, if you have to be involved in an altercation, that's not just dealing with a drunk dude in a bar. If you are involved in a honest to goodness fight, unless you're an actual violence professional that deals with this on a regular basis, seek some counseling. Seriously, you'll really thank yourself in the long run.
Absolutely. That's very well said. There are resources out there. And I'll look at seeing about sharing some of them with these posts, because you can go to places like BetterHelp. There's a number of them online. You can do them privately. They're discreet, but there's also ones that are free. And there are people out there who will help. And many of them who are not just trained to help, they'll understand on a level that, I think speaking with family and friends is always good, people you trust, but sometimes speaking to somebody you don't know and a stranger can also be very therapeutic, because you almost be more inclined to share more instead of trying to hide a part of yourself that you feel might be judged by somebody you know. And I think that, in pushing that out there, and you see a lot of that there's grief groups, grief counseling. There's, just like you'd have an AA meeting, there are meetings for these types of things, and they are some of the most warm and inviting atmospheres where you can go be vulnerable, and it's not going to be something that is ever going to be held against you. They're never going to look at you and be like, you shouldn't have thought that, you shouldn't have said that. And some of these things, when they come up, having those emotions, and whether it's guilt or anything you could think to feel, it will be understood, and it will be helped along the way just by vocalizing. And that's the hardest part, is to go say, I need help, I got a problem.
And something else I recommend for everybody. James Keating, Master in Arms, James A. Keating, is an amazing martial artist. Closest thing to a Saturday morning kung fu legend that I've ever met in real life. I always say that if I walked into a studio one day and saw him levitating above the floor, I'd be like, yeah, tracks. That level of martial artist. But he said, and I'm kind of paraphrasing here, you can walk a dark path, but you have to carry the light. And when we look at what we're talking about here, even though we're dealing with super grim topics, take your training seriously. Don't take yourself too seriously. And always try to end any training session on a light note, something fun, some kind of game, whatever. Even if it's just, even if you're working out by yourself, put on a piece of music that takes you out of that headspace, something to get you out of that dark place. You got to be your own light.
Right. Absolutely. Go touch the tree and leave your problem there, and you're training at the door. Just like when you walk in, you leave your problems from the outside world at the dojo mat and do your training, and then leave your training at the dojo mat until you get to pick it up again next, because that's an excellent point as well.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of why in traditional martial arts, there is so much ritual involved with opening and closing class. It's entering you into one psychological space and then taking you out of that psychological space.
Absolutely. In Parker's Kempo, we have this thing at the end called pass it down, and we all line up. And so similar to how soccer teams, football teams, baseball teams will shake hands at the end.
Mm-hmm.
What we do is we all line up from the instructor down to the white belts, and they just take a little hammer fist and they tag you in the stomach, just lightly or appropriately leveled, so for whatever rank you are, and it goes all the way down and it comes all the way back up, and it signifies several things, but it is the camaraderie of the group. Mm-hmm. It is we are, here for each other, but it also has that level of control. And I think the human connection aspect that is extremely important. All these things that we do, we're just connecting on different levels. And I think it's great that, like you said, with having that entry and exit, and reminding, everybody, come back and, do this tomorrow and not end up out there having to really deal with one of these things. And remember, there's people here for you. They're not, not going to be going out there and then having to deal with any of that stuff on your own. If something happens, come back and tell us. And, share what you have going on.
The moment you started talking about that, immediately in my mind, because I'm such a movie whore, I thought of the Jeff Speakman movie.
Perfect Weapon.
Yeah, Perfect Weapon. And I always liked that they included that little bit there in the beginning when they're going through the training montages and they're passing it down. I was like, that's pretty cool.
Pass it down, yeah.
I'm not a Kempo guy, but I know plenty of people that are. So
it was a cool little point, yeah. And Jennifer knocks down Jeff and has to help him back up, and it's there's a lot of different versions of what that's about out there, but I think all of them are beautiful.
I get a little bit I get a little bit of humor out of it. I'm known as an edged weapons guy. All right. I teach, I promote edged weapons, but really I'm a firearms guy. If you gotta put things in the
there you go.
But here's the thing. Training with a firearm is significantly easier than training with a knife. And I don't mean to downplay all the discipline that it takes to operate a firearm properly.
Right.
With a knife, it's a constant level of maintenance and practice and understanding. And it is like the one thing I never want to have to deal with is a knife wielding assailant, because the chaos of a knife fight is insane. It's the firearm, get cover, point, aim, good sight picture, trigger press, all very easily drilled and relatively easy to maintain.
Right.
But, you are not and as much as I loathe the term knife fighter, because you attended a seminar. you have to constantly train. And
Right.
it's just the most horrible thing out there to have to deal with.
Right.
And
Yeah.
use.
That term drive you nuts too about, you brought a knife to a gunfight. Every time I hear that, I'm like, no, you brought a knife to a fight.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things that is amazing about edged weapons training is if you look at it in the right perspective, it's not just about that edged weapon. It's teaching you distance. It's teaching you timing. It's teaching you to use any kind of improvised thing that you can pick up and put in your hand. You know, it's not really about the knife. The knife is almost secondary.
Right.
Really look at what we get out of training with an edged weapon. So
yeah. No, absolutely, I agree. And the thing that I talk about this with the edge weapon stuff. I always say, so with a firearm, it's, if you're actually going to be in a firefight, it's a whole different thing than if you're just shooting somebody. And I think everybody has this preemptive, like, I just need to get a gun, because they're not thinking about the reactionary seconds and gap. They're thinking about, I can just go boom, and not any of the part that is playing catch up. You have to know first and then be able to get to it. And all that goes into that. The thing that makes me just so about all edge weapons is that not only does that exist, but it's relatively easy for anybody to pick up a blade and stab you. It's harder for them to aim and accurately aim and do that, but it's easier to defend in close proximity a firearm, because it's only a weapon in the one direction. And otherwise than that, then if I don't like, strikes with them, because I'm afraid I'm going to break the trigger or something, but it's either a hammer or it's a firearm, but in that one way. A knife is a knife, no matter what direction we're going in.
yeah,
It takes vastly more skill to be able to defend and stop a knife attacker than it does a gun attacker if you're within arm's reach.
I don't remember who said it, but I have completely stolen this quote. So whoever originally came up with it in context, my apologies. But say, if you really want to know how good you are with a knife, give a 6-year-old a magic marker and tell them to draw on you.
Are you familiar with that drill from the Philippines?
Yeah.
Oh man, the two shirts and the paintbrush and the lipstick on the paintbrush, and then you just count, and they choose the winner by who has the least amount of lipstick on their shirt and where they've been gotten. Because all knife across the neck is considered kill shots, and then certain parts on the body. But in the Philippines, they will literally count the lipstick marks all over your body and who has survived.
That's one of the things I really like about, the latest technology with the shop knives and stuff like that over the last couple of years, as they've gained more popularity. I just wish they weren't so expensive, so most schools can easily get a couple of them. But, they are painful enough that it gets an adrenaline response, and it gives you a little bit more fear, and you feel more like you're fighting than training with your buddy in the gym.
Right.
And,
those little taser versions, right? That shock you when you touch it. You're talking about,
yeah.
How much are those?
The actual shock knife brand, I think it's like $800 for a pair of them.
Oh, okay.
But understand they're not light tasers. They're tasers. They're tasers in a knife form. So when you've got them juiced up, they hit hard.
Absolutely.
It's
not.
That
price you can get simunition too. I remember doing the simunition course, and it sounds like the real thing, feels like the real thing, and I like it because it can go into your own real firearm. And they've got different versions of them too. Some of them may have fake guns that actually cycle dummy rounds, like you were talking with your BB gun. I love that.
I'm a big fan of the airsoft for your average person, because they're easily affordable.
Perfect for training.
When you go talking about buying simunition rounds, and you start talking about using actual firearms with simunition, or even purpose-built simunition guns that can't handle the pressure of a firearm, you need dedicated ranges. You need all sorts of safety things. that you
Yep.
got to deal with. With an airsoft pistol, you put on a pair of goggles and you can go in your backyard. And, I think
Yep.
for most people, that is an awesome way to approach it. Uh, especially
Yep.
if you've gotten some actual training on defensive firearm tactics and that sort of thing.
Right.
Now, it's a way to keep your training up, and it's a lot cheaper.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So yeah, you can do it very cheap, and I like that too because it'll sting you a little bit, so you'll know if you get got.
Yeah,
But first thing we doing with those, and I remember we were doing it up at the Loveland range. They had classes afterward basically, and towards the end of the night, they would basically just drop all the stalls down, and they'd let us do Tueler. And put on little goggles, and some of those guys were so good, they would nick you, and you could feel it, and it would nick you in the goggle. But you are almost always getting to the guy with the gun at the 21 feet. And a lot of people will talk about this and say, well, it's most firefights will happen, or most shootings, not firefights, will happen inside of 6 feet. And some people say, well, that's a police statistic, for those guys.
It's actually it's a law enforcement statistic, and it comes out of the FBI. And it's one of the things that this is my personal philosophy, and I don't want anybody to think that I am suggesting they think this way. As I've gotten older, and as I have done more and more with firearms, I still practice sighted shooting. I still practice aiming. There's a red dot. There's a hollow sun on my carry pistol.
Nice.
But what I'm really worried about in my lifestyle is within my house.
Right.
And there's no place in my house that's too long that I can't point shoot.
Right.
Now, I'm not suggesting that you go out and necessarily train point shooting.
Right.
I think it's a good thing, and I still think you absolutely 100% need to master good basics of aimed fire and relatively good combat shooting. But when we are dealing with real world crime, real world application, those distances are quite compressed.
Oh yeah.
We don't have a police cruiser between us and
the engine block, right?
Yeah. No.
So
what we've got is our pistol and our bathrobe, and somebody's in your house.
Exactly. Let me ask you this then: are you a clear the house guy or a strong point guy?
I am a go to the back room and grab a shotgun, and you can have any of my crap as long as everybody in my. I love it. I'm not here to win. I'm here to survive.
Right.
And my TV can be replaced. That kind of stuff is all replaceable. But
absolutely.
If you enter into that, last bastion, well, then we're talking a completely different story. And
right. Yeah.
You're getting a shotgun to the face.
It's one of the things we always talk about with the family, because I've actually seen videos where people say, shotguns are the worst for home defense. And that my only thing with it is I'm a huge fan of double out buck, because especially in the morning, right, when these things happen, they happen in the dark, groggy, you hear something, your eyes aren't great. And, some people will actually put optics on shotguns. I don't even need any of that. Literally just a freaking, at the end of the 12 gauge, a little nub. But I don't need to aim. And, we're running a pump action just that way.
Yeah. You just need to make sure it's pointed in the right direction, and everything you want to destroy is everything that you don't want to destroy is behind you.
Exactly. Yeah. No, well, for sure. And we were talking about that with that strong pointing, and depending on how your house is set up, making sure you got, all of the family or all the people you live with back behind you, and then it didn't matter. I remember there was a video of Shrek, John McVie, talking about that, and his whole, he said he would prefer, a rifle or a pistol, because then, with all the little BBs and double up buck, he's got to repair. And it was so funny because, an experienced person on that level, for his concern to be, repairing the house later, I thought was just so humorous, because most of us were like, who cares about the sheetrock? But he's just like, it's Tuesday. I just drop a couple guys. It's fine.
Yeah, I mean, you've got guys that are trained to that level that's their profession,
Right.
and they're going to do things and use tools that require a level of training that the average person just isn't going to get. And what they can accomplish with that is not what you and I can accomplish.
Right. No.
But
that's it. Crazy.
They're still good to listen to.
Oh yeah. It's an excellent consideration.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm with you. I'm 12 gauge all day long. I don't want to. But so not just that. The reason I always like for the 12 gauge for home defense specifically because you run conditioning 3, and as soon as that racking sound is unmistakable, everybody in the world, like somebody comes in and you rack around into the 12 gauge, you're gonna know it's big.
Mine's magazine fed, so I don't really worry about that too much.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think. And Tim Kennedy did a video on that once. He was saying about, and I'm a huge fan of this, situationally dependent. If I'm walking out the house in flip flops, I'm not carrying a whole thing on me. You got a knife, you got a mag, you got a gun, keys, wallet, cargo. And I think that's, pretty well appropriate depending on where you're going, what you're doing. You don't need a whole setup going around 7-Eleven.
I mean, what we're talking about here is really people understanding what their goal is.
Right.
What the ultimate end purpose is. And the ultimate end purpose as civilians is not to beat the other guy.
Right.
Not to be the winner. What you want to do is be able to get away.
Get off the edge.
That's the thing. And, sometimes you can't do that. But you don't need to run around, going to Walmart in a full tactical vest carrying AR-15,
Right.
It's some people take it to levels of fetish and
gun porn. That's right.
gun porn. And I like I said, I'm a gun guy. I love all that stuff, but I'm very realistic about what's going to happen in my day-to-day life.
Right.
And as I always say, if you don't go stupid places with stupid people and do stupid things, you're probably never, ever going to need that stuff. Ever. But if you make poor life choices, you have to be able to deal with those consequences.
Right. Yeah, it's, I know no crime has any kind of zip code. We were talking about that in that first episode, about just locations and kind of where you are, what your mindset is in that moment. And, anything can come to you. I think one of the for me anyway, I've seen dangerous things more so on the roadway, and especially like out in a rural area. Like Angela had a whole situation where some guy, I guess he thought she was somebody else, ended up slamming on the brakes and cutting her off on a 2-lane road and just stopping there, getting out of his car, trying to rush. He just put it in reverse and got way the hell back, reached out, grabbed her gun, and he got back in the car and then tried to come back up around. She just gunned it. He went to flip a U-turn and she lost him. And
you talk about something really important there that a lot of people don't address in self-defense. This is something I'm really huge on, and I tell people this. My standard speech is this: skip your next seminar, whatever it is, doesn't matter. Skip it. Take that money, go hire a self-defense lawyer, and talk to them for an hour. Do that. For your jurisdiction. Do that. Number 2, take a driving course.
There you go. Yep.
Learn how to operate a motor vehicle at a higher level than your basic, I got my driver's license when I was 16 and haven't thought about it since then.
Right.
And number 3, get good first aid training. You will do so much more for defending yourself by doing those things.
Right.
Than you will going to the next latest and greatest tactical knife poobah or Army Delta Force Ranger, Navy SEAL, Green Beret, blah, 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 gun trainer,
Right. Absolutely. Is there anything from that situation, after that situation, that you would have changed for yourself or your students, having gone through that, or is it kind of status quo?
It is 99% status quo. There's only one thing I would have changed about it, and that was that I should have emphasized with her more to use the correct ammunition.
What you use?
She was using light target loads, and she left them. She was doing some shooting. She did not reload it with proper defensive ammo when she got home. She was using light target loads.
Interesting.
So it's one of the otherwise she did everything perfectly,
Right.
exactly as she trained to do.
Right.
But that's, something to be aware of.
Yeah.
Make sure that if you're taking your pistol to the range, when you bring it home, you clean it, you do the proper maintenance, and you load it with the right ammunition.
Absolutely. Would you have recommended? So I do the same I'll run FMJ on the range. I won't shoot my hollow points just because they're more expensive. But FMJ will go through you just fine. Would you have recommended her like critical defense, hollow points, or?
Yeah, critical defense. That's actually what I've got in my pistol right now. The one thing I do is every year I get new ammo for my pistol.
Good, yeah.
I take the rounds that I was carrying for defensive use because they are hotter than most target loads, and I burn them off on some targets, and then I replace them with fresh ammo. Just smart way to go about it. And then the rest of the time when I'm doing practice, I just buy cheap ass Winchester white box at Walmart like everybody else.
There you go.
Yeah,
I like that. That's what there's a good amount of that stuff that I do for our paid content there in firearms. And I don't always know that that's always a question. Does rounds expire? And I've never seen anything that says that they do, but I have seen some people say that you can't have. So, like what you're talking about with revolvers, you're not going to have a jam. You could have a dud, but that's why it's great with a revolver because all you got to do is squeeze again, and you'll get the second one. But I do like the idea with that because, some people will say that the difference is between rimfire and centerfire. And I don't know that that's true. I've heard that. Have you ever experienced anything with it?
What I will say about rimfire is that it's not that rimfire is a bad ammunition design. It's that rimfire is generally cheaply manufactured. And that's what creates all the leakage. The other thing to understand about rimfire is, and I'm not sure about the current chemical composition, but the old explosive, the primer in a rimfire, was corrosive. And just sitting, you ever I say you ever to those listening, you find an old box of 22 in the attic that your granddad's had up there for 60 years, and it's green. That green is not because the brass turned green. The green is because of the salts that are in the primer that are eating through the brass. It's not
very different than green tip.
yeah, very different. It's not as big a deal with modern ammunition. Most of that stuff is pretty well manufactured. And if you're buying good defensive ammo, it should last you quite some time, just in situ without anything happening. I just personally feel better refreshing my ammo once a year. Your mileage might vary.
There you go. I love that. No, I don't have an annual thing, but I do. What I usually say is that do not let it stay in, because you should be going to, if you carry a firearm anyway, you should be going to the ammo store every 6 months, because you should be training that much at least to be able to maintain the skill set, because like anything else, it is a skill set. And I think a lot of people will get to a certain level of accuracy and then they feel like they're good and then they don't train but annually. And I'm like, I know a lot of police departments have an annual qualification, but some have a quarterly qualification, because your skills can diminish. And it's not just, about that, it's about being human and hand-eye coordination and how is your eyesight. And I think that, so many of these things, why I love these series is that these are the things, as you said, don't get talked about a lot. So many of those, a lot of instructors out there will take you through the how, and I don't think, and one of the reasons I'm very appreciative to have you on, is I don't think a majority of them will know it at the level you do. And, especially for our viewers, you can go check out Instructor Cannata's pages. It's far more than knife. You'll see a lot of weapons work, which is fantastic, but you get these kind of concepts and the knowledge here. I always knew I liked his stuff, but then watching even for 2 seconds and hearing the different concepts of things I haven't heard in that way before. Every video he has brings an educational element to it that's just phenomenal. And I didn't even know about Piper or Medusa until he was talking about Piper and Medusa. And I've been in martial arts for 34 years, teaching for 26.
Well, there are systems that fly under the radar, and Medusa's relatively new, and Piper is relatively new. The practices aren't new, but the codification and systemization of these ideas and principles and tactics, that's what's new.
Right.
So
it's fantastic. I love the breakdowns, everything you said about them. They they were great, and I love about coming from the prisons. There's a couple of guys who were in the CQC groups I've trained with who are primarily veterans or military or cops or formerly, and then there's been a couple of them that were also felons, and some of the things that they were going through, from what they've seen, it didn't really matter what side of the aisle you were on. These people were all dealing with this one thing. And this one thing isn't really one thing, it's multiple levels. It's exactly. And so their ways of approaching it and training it, it doesn't really matter what side of the tracks you're going, talking about those and what's going to save your life. I loved that explanation. They're both Piper and Medusa. That was great. And the checking, is the fight over? I loved that so much because
it's so important. We are not murderers.
Right.
I'm not training murderers.
Right.
I'm training people to use the most effective strategies and tactics that are available to them.
Absolutely.
And you have to be your own self-regulator if you get into some form of conflict. But that being said, you also have to make a choice beforehand how far you're willing to go and when you're willing to go.
Absolutely.
And
very, very well said.
If I could give you anything, is remember that. Make that choice beforehand. Because if you've already made that choice, you don't have to sit there and hem and haw. The number of people that are dead that didn't realize they were in a fight is legion.
It brings up those 2 good points. My brother Josh, he always says that. It's not a logical brother, but he it's like a brother to me. He always says, the first person to, or no, the last person to know they're in the fight is usually the first person to be hit.
Mm-hmm.
And
one of the things that when it comes to knife work in general, using a knife is deadly force in every single jurisdiction in the United States. Legally, in the eyes of the law, it is no different than using that Glock 9mm. It's deadly force. The tool doesn't matter. And people don't see that. It's like, well, a knife is less lethal. And no, it's not. No, it's not.
No.
And people need to understand that. If they don't understand that, I don't know what to do with them. Right. Try to educate them, but for some reason, people think a knife is somewhat less in some way than a firearm, and that's just not true.
Yeah, I think there's a perspective where they think, well, number one, and I'm sure you see this all the time too, is the general public and almost all people that I've seen that don't train, they try to apply rationale and solution to something that is inherently irrational and chaos and confusion. And that's part of this whole thing with the series. And everybody I've talked to, those things are always present: chaos, confusion. Every time.
That's one of the things I'm really, loving about the Piper system. For those of you that are watching, the South African knife system, it is a martial art that thrives in chaos. It is built around chaos. It is not built on a linear thought process. I describe it frequently as being fractal in nature, and that it starts from a seed, and that seed determines what you do next. You're always moving into emptiness. You're always dominating through pressure. You're not ever playing a defensive game. And, the one of the founders of the system used to describe it as, the defense is built in. Right. But that's such I know what he was trying to say. But what he's really saying is the defense is, the old saying, the best defense is a good offense.
Good offense, right?
Attack and the attack.
You got to get in there and do it. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think, there's so many things with that. And I very much so appreciate that in your lessons for it, because I had not heard of Piper before you were talking about it. It's been a couple of months and just having conversations with you. And I know, one other person that trains it, and Instructor Dybala, he has, he's in coma and a few things, but he just trains all different kinds of stuff. And I'm so, I think of this about, Filipino martial arts, and not just because of the popularity. There's a number of systems, and goodness, you were talking about a few in the meeting the other day. What were the other ones you trained?
Primarily right now, the two big things I actually, so hard to describe. Piper and Medusa are the ones that I teach the most often. All right. But I have a class where I am teaching what I call Calisa Americano, which is my entirety, my entire approach, and what I have developed from the study of various systems throughout the years, from historical European martial arts, Filipino martial arts, Japanese martial arts, Korean martial arts. It's just it's what went through the meat grinder and came out today, and
that's awesome.
I've really reached a point, and this sounds so bizarre to say, but I'm reaching a point in my life where I'm forgetting who taught me what, and it's getting harder and harder to say what system this came from. But a big part of that is so much of my martial arts approach is finding the universal. If you want to learn a specific system that I happen to teach, I will teach you that specific system as the curriculum is laid out, by the organization. However, if you come to me as one of my direct students that's, not, how do I put this, training somebody else's martial arts, what I really try to teach people to do is to recognize human movement, good body mechanics, not getting caught up in the cult of a system, because no one system has all the answers. As I always say, there's only one martial art. All systems and styles are that one martial art expressed through climate, culture, and technology. And it's the process of finding that, and not necessarily teaching an individual that this is what you do when this happens. It's giving them the tools to be able to rapidly adjust and deal with things in the moment.
For the toolbox, right?
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's also why I'm not rich, because I don't.
The more that, and I quote you all the time with that about human motion is human motion. I thought that was genius, and I expressed a few different ways, a few different times, but that really, even in business, we have a saying about that we are not, the product we sell is not what we're actually doing. Everybody's in the people business because
Well,
dogs don't buy your products.
so the record is 100% straight. I did not come up with human motion is human motion. That comes from Kelly Warden, who amazing martial artist, who you should absolutely look into if you've never heard of him.
What was his name again?
Kelly Warden.
Billy Moore. Okay.
Yeah. He's the one that, or that, as far as I know, coined that phrase, human motion is human motion. And what he was really talking about at the time that he said it was, how martial arts blend and flow together because we only move so many ways. We only move so many. And we are only capable of doing so many things with the physical structures and limitations that we have. And it really struck me. It was just the most poetic, perfect way of saying that truth that I had been looking for. It's like human motion is just human motion. That's it. And so I've got to give credit where credit is due. I can't really reach out to, I can't claim that, amazing insight for myself.
I think, no matter where it came from, I always just that because I know being on the apps and everything and sharing your videos, but that all ideas, I think, of course, expressed before, everything's been done before. And it makes you wonder kind of, how all these things get put together. But I love that and the way that you do yours, especially because I feel like everybody who's gone kind of through the meat grinder, as you say, have, gotten to that conclusion of we have to improvise in the moment. And so I don't want you to think about it as the system is this. You can learn in these variety of ways, but when you get here, you have this option, this option, this option, and you pick. And I love that, especially with the creation of your own things. When did you start coming to put your stuff together?
When did I start putting it?
Yeah. So like, when did you get out of like the, going with the specific system to building what you do now, how you do it?
Oh, let's see. When did I get my 5th degree? That was 2001 maybe.
Okay.
That I got my 5th Dan. And at that point, my the instructor, the head instructor of the system passed away.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and it was just like, well, I'm never going to advance in that, any further. It's not like, after we're not a system that had a lot of ranks. 5th Dan was it,
Right. What was that original one?
Ren Rakudo. It was a system put together by a man named BK Luke. He was a Force Recon Marine in Vietnam.
Okay.
He was some ridiculous level in Kajukenbo. I'd have to go look it all up. But he also did a crap ton of various Filipino martial arts and got tired of their politics and all the da-da-da-da-da and just said, screw all this, and went off and started doing his own thing. That really is kind of where I started this whole, lifelong journey of, or my addiction to Filipino martial arts. And, once he passed away, I was teaching his stuff, but not only was I teaching his stuff, but it was like, I change it here, I change it there, change it here. My understanding of historical European martial arts was growing, and little bits of that started to come in. And one day, basically, I realized, wait a minute, I'm not teaching his system anymore. I'm teaching something else. His system is the root, and his system will always be the thing that, I point to, my foundation. But, what it is now is a blend of so many different things. And, and really I'd really say probably since 2013. Yeah, since 2013, I've really been much more drawn and pulling from historical European arts.
Okay. Yeah.
And, a lot of people like, why? Why are you doing that? And I'm going to say something that a lot of people are going to hate me for. But the vast majority of Filipino martial arts, as they are expressed today, are historical Spanish swordsmanship. It's just changed for the weapons. That's not saying that what the individual heads of systems did is not fantastic and wonderful and great. And like I said, I love it. I love it. But the original reason I tried to, I got involved in Filipino martial arts was because I was trying to understand Western martial arts more. And when all you've got to go by is dead manuals of hand-drawn pictures,
Right.
and text from, languages that don't really make sense to the modern ear when you're reading, you got to find something really close that is still carrying those ideas.
Yeah.
And, the Filipino martial arts are. As strange as that sounds. And the true beauty and creativity of Filipino martial arts is how they combine that with their indigenous approaches and brought it over into, the modern day in something that you can do quite effectively in the current context. If that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah. I always love the saying from Filipino martial arts is, doing the sticks because you can find two sticks anywhere. And I remember thinking about that and the European influences and so many people were carrying, rapiers. And that was kind of the standard setup is you'd have a rapier and then you'd have a dagger,
Right.
and usually both, in that, one typically in the full tank sense. I guess it depends on where you would go, but the Japanese having their same type of a thing. And even the Chinese, a lot of people are carrying, a katana and a tanto, or they have, a long sword and then a medium sword, and then maybe even a knife, off the side. And that was kind of their setup with it. And, but, every one of them, they all have this specific to their culture, specific to what was going on then and what, a lot of people would also be carrying. So, like I said, with doing the stuff with firearms is because other people have them. And so you end up pinned down with somebody who's, firing at you and you don't have a way to return fire. You got a problem. And,
right.
There's things you can do, but, so I think that modern influence specifically, and that's also why very much so like Kali and Arnis and, Eskrima and.
Here's the other thing about that. One of the reasons it is so effective is because outside of those circles, nobody is practicing edged weapons to that level. It has either been relegated to some form of cosplay or some form of sport.
Yeah.
Not actually getting out there and trying to hit the other guy.
Right.
Trying to put the pointy end in them. And, Filipino martial arts kept that tradition alive in a way nobody else did. One of the big problems here in the West, is that the gun came along and we went, that's a lot better. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a very pragmatic approach to fighting.
I almost wonder if it was a revolver that did that because, back when you had, flint and muzzle loaders and, the moment that you'd have to actually work to get the round in and, versus having a knife on you, we get to revolvers and all of a sudden there's 6, and whether you go with a butterfly clip and move on.
I love the Bowie knife. I teach Bowie knife among other things. And it's the American short sword, for lack of a better word.
Right.
And, when we get to the big when we look at the famous sandbar duel and Major Wright and Jim Bowie and how they got into that fight, Major Wright had a sword cane. Bowie had the knife. Everybody else was involved in that because it wasn't just the two of them in a vacuum. They were actually there as seconds for two other people that were dueling.
Okay.
And when things went sideways and all the pistols had been fired, out came the blades.
Right.
And so it was in this very narrow period of American history where you carried both, because you had that one shot, and
Right.
you had to go to something else. And I always found that really fascinating. That transitional period. But yeah, once we got a good, solid working percussion revolver with 6 chambers, you didn't need a big knife anymore.
Yeah, a lot of it's changing. It's always interesting. I mean, I think a lot of it's come back in today's day and age too, because almost everybody that I know who carries a firearm does also at least carry a pocket knife. I don't really know anybody who would carry that. I know plenty of people who carry a knife that don't carry a gun, but almost nobody that I know who carries a gun doesn't also carry a knife. At least something.
The funny thing is, I don't carry a knife to be a knife guy. No,
Sure.
I carry a knife because my grandfather gave me my very first pocket knife.
Okay.
And this is what he told me. He says, a gentleman always has 2 things with him. He always has a handkerchief in case a lady needs it, and he always has a knife because he never knows what he'll face.
I love it. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And it's just one of those, things that stuck with me.
Mm-hmm.
And, I've always got both. Even if it's just a bandana, I got both.
And you got the bandana?
Pardon?
And the other one was a bandana, is that what you said?
Yeah. Even if it's only a bandana, not an actual.
Yep.
But yeah, it's the idea. And it just stuck with me for my entire life, but it has changed from over the years, it has changed from a Swiss Army knife to a multi-tool to, now generally I have as much as I hate to say it, a fighting folder and a orc folder, occasionally a fixed blade. But
you do that situationally dependent as well, depending on where you're going, kind of thing.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's like in my day job, I'm very limited on what I can carry.
Right.
But if because I can't have a knife with a blade longer than 2.5 inches. I generally prefer a 3 to 4 inch blade. It's just because it's not for a tactical reason. It's actually for a work reason. It's for cutting a piece of rope. It's for cutting a seat belt. It's for things that you need a certain cutting edge to be able to cut efficiently with, as opposed to sitting there with a little 2-inch knife trying to saw through.
Right, saw it back and forth. Yeah.
It's,
that makes sense.
And when you look at the traditional use knives throughout all of history, 4 to 5 inch blade, some smaller ones, some a little bigger, but
right. Yeah, I think even back throughout all of it, you're right. Those, two blades, being fixed blades, and they would have, like 5-6 inches of knife, and then you have your main weapon of your sword, and no matter where you went. And it's been very interesting seeing all of this from different cultures. That's why it was very interesting about that with Piper. No, you also said Medusa. What was that?
All right. So Medusa and Piper are kissing cousins. Medusa comes out of South Africa, specifically the gang cultures and the prisons, or Piper does. Medusa comes out of the American prison system, and they're very. All right, I think the easiest way to approach this is to explain the development of each system. Number one, if you go to either of these places and you ask them, what is Medusa? What is Piper? They're going to look at you like you're an idiot. They are both collections, they are both a body of techniques, an algorithm in a lot of ways from the criminal culture's evolution of the use of a knife. One is, very Western. One is, sub-Saharan. The biggest difference between the two is location and a big point in philosophy. Now, Medusa, its basic algorithm is shock, latch, stab. You see this over and over again on CCTV footage of prisoners. They'll wrap the other one up, and then they'll just overwhelm them with stabs. It's very gross motor. It's very brutal.
Yeah.
There's almost no defense to it. And it's rather interesting how these systems that evolve in these environments don't have a lot of defensive technique. The defense is overwhelming aggression. Piper comes from a very different culture and has a very different evolution. And whereas Piper comes from the use of a shield and a spear or a war club, because of that, it has a lot of twisting, rotational movement, and it doesn't grapple. And I've recently started calling it full body chisao because we don't, what I mean by this, and it's just the easiest if I give a little demonstration here. So if we look at, starting with the idea of Medusa, shock, latch, and stab. All right. Can we see this? Yeah. So I might do something. He's getting whatever in my face. There's that moment of I realize I'm going to, some kind of deadly force encounter. Let me switch out a training blade. Let me switch out my live blade for a training blade. So something's going on here. I'm going to do something to take his mind off of attacking me. That is the shock phase of Medusa. So it might be something like a thumb to the eyeball and then drop into a clinch, get my knife out, and then start going to work. It's a very simplistic way of approaching it. But a simple algorithm done effectively works.
Right.
Now, there's things to understand. It is much more grappling based. As I said, there's a lot of binding and tying. I'm going to be close to this guy to limit his ability to do anything.
Right.
The more I'm stuffing him, the more I can hit him. Whereas in Piper, which started off as an ambush system, Piper doesn't grab the opponent. Piper doesn't latch. I'm not going to tie up his clothes. I'm not going to grab an arm. Instead, what's going to happen is I'm going to do a movement. All right, this is called a flick. It's simply popping the tip of the knife into the target.
Right.
That's going to create a reaction.
Right.
Whichever way he moves, I'm falling into that void.
Yeah.
This void is where I'm going to start. I'm not grappling with him. I'm moving around him.
Right.
You know, I push, I apply pressure, and then I let him go so he falls back.
Right.
Yeah, the natural push and pull, but it's not done in a grappling sense.
Right.
It's done by moving around your opponent. So
I like it. That's awesome.
they're very different flavors of, they're different answers to the same question in the same environments from two different cultures. That's
Right.
the way to frame it.
Like it. I like it a lot.
Yeah, and honestly, if you study one, you should study the other. I personally believe. And
I imagine so.
I really think the average person should start with Medusa because it's simple. One of the things I like Medusa for personally is active shooter scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
And part of Medusa was put together based on, and when I say put together, what I mean is they organize these stylistic things we see in prison.
Mm-hmm.
And Medusa is essentially a 1 or 2 seminar, get the basic gist of it, and then go practice it on your own because this isn't complicated stuff.
Right.
And the idea is so, and where I think it applies really great here in the States, is Becky from accounting doesn't know how to fight. But Becky from accounting might run into an active shooter in her work, and she might be put in that position where she has nothing else to do. If she has that simple, compact algorithm of Medusa, she at least has a plan that she can drive forward with and maybe save herself. And it doesn't have to be a knife. She could pick up the stapler off her desk and still apply this shock, latch, stab philosophy to it.
Right.
You know,
I say letter opener, but yeah, absolutely. You can grab anything and do it with a pen.
Yeah, exactly. We often have talked about changing the algorithm name from shock, latch, stab to shock, latch, strike, because it encompasses everything.
Right.
Whereas Medusa, there are, forgive me, I'm
Piper.
flipping. Whereas Piper is a long, I don't want to say long. I mean, you can be completely functional in Piper in 6 months to a year. There is a lot more to it. There's a lot more development, and a lot of that is cultural and traditional. Coming out of South Africa. So I think they're great things to study, especially from a self-defense point of view, because both of them, and this has always been one of my problems with defensive thinking in martial arts. We've talked about this before. Your defense will eventually crumble.
Right.
And it only takes one thing to get through. So use that, attack the attack. And these are systems that teach you to attack the attack, to, attack the ambush. Heck, the United States Army has known this for decades, and every person who goes through basic training learns that you don't try to hide in your truck from the ambush. No, you dismount and you attack the ambush. It's the exact same thing in a personal altercation, interpersonal violence.
I love that with those, and especially from when I put together the MLH program, it was similar to all of that, just most amount of damage, least amount of time, highest value targets. And the concern when I rewrote all of Parker's techniques was how do people go to martial arts schools and they feel like, in a week or two, they're going to be able to do this one move maybe. And then, they start to build up, but there's like really this expectancy that until they've been doing it for a while, that they're going to be able to use any of this stuff. And that was kind of the problem I had is if they come to one class and they're attacked the next day, what are they doing? And so I love that idea for it. And I guess so I have it in the curriculum with baton. So we open hand, baton, edged weapons, and usually just pocket knife, and firearm. And, I don't require them to take all of them because some people are comfortable with guns, and that's fine. So you can just do the other three and,
in some
however you want.
places, they're illegal.
Right.
You live outside the United States.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And this is, as teachers, this is absolutely something we have to consider.
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. So I think and part of that, when I was looking at it, was so you can use a squirt gun. You can use anything you want. You can use a finger gun. But we set up a technique so that they have the ability to know how to do things if it's brought to them. Because that's one of the biggest concerns always is no matter where you go, there's at least one there, it's yours. So I put together a whole amount of this like that. But with that idea in mind from the get-go, even the open hand stuff is, the most amount of damage, the least amount of time, and the highest value target. So I'm not messing around with, we did the video the other day on caging because I don't like the blocking as much because that requires me to come out and try to catch the attack. Whereas if I'm caged and Filipino martial arts goes into this heavily, all I'm doing is getting to myself, absorbing, and then going in. And that I thought was perfect because all I have to do is beat him to me, not go out and meet him before he gets to me. Mm-hmm. And especially for beginners, what they know in the beginning is the hardest.
One of the biggest things I have trouble with students in FMA is overextension of blocks. Mm-hmm. And they're wanting to push their blocks way outside of their body instead of learning to go, oh, no,
I love that. Yep.
It's right here. All right. Mm-hmm. In line, just a little bit past your shoulder, Right. And even better, if you could just bring it to your center line and turn your center line up, bisect what's coming at you. You're in an even better position. So getting people to understand this is so difficult.
Well, yeah, they're going to bring it. If it's real, they're bringing it to you anyway. Yeah. And what I love about that is keeping it tight. That's a huge problem I see in all martial arts is that people think that the fight is happening here and not like right there. Like every time it's right here. We're not back here at sparring distance and kicking each other. And my favorite example of that is I'll grab Bob, or if I'm in an in-person class, I'll grab the guy and I'll put him right up against the wall, and I'm like, we're going over that table and chairs, or we're going straight into this wall. Mm-hmm. That's where this happens. It meets hard surfaces everywhere, and at no point are we going to be back here trying to do this. This isn't a match. You're going to be going to the floor, back up again, and I hear it all the time too. With 90% of fights go to the ground, 90% of fights stay standing up, and I hate when people put statistics in it because 100% of fights are chaos.
Those statistics came out of the LAPD. The original 90% of all fights go to the ground.
Right.
They're leaving out a very important part of that. 90% of all officer-involved fights go to the ground. Right. Because that's how they're maintaining control of the suspect in handcuffing them.
Right.
They miss that part. And it is so
I've heard a few of them like that. And what was interesting when I started researching, because since Noah and I had that conversation, he had a video on it. What I found in researching a good amount of this, and you can go to there's pewpewresearch.com. There's a few research sites. So I hate doing percentiles because it does depend on the demographic, but I would say the majority of them, and my father said the same thing, is if it's real, there's a good chance it's going to the ground. But it doesn't mean that both parties are, because a lot of people think of it in terms of grappling. There's a good chance it's going to the ground because I'm taking you to the ground and now you're down there while I'm up here. Yeah, so in that sense, it could be to the ground right away too.
Even in traditional Japanese martial arts, before things became so MMA focused, right. Knee on belly was a thing. And, passing something, taking somebody down, and then pinning them with your belly, they're down, you're still up. Right. This has always been a part of combat. But, it's... and that whole 90% thing was latched onto by the Gracies to promote their jiu-jitsu. Being a weapons guy and not being a sport guy,
Mm-hmm.
I have a very different viewpoint on a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
But what bothers me is so much of the marketing of sport fighting is leading people to believe they can defend themselves. And I'm not saying they can't. And 90% of the time, that guy in a jiu-jitsu gym that's working out all the time is going to be able to beat the drunk at the bar.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Or restrain his, drunk uncle or whatever. And it is beautiful for that.
Right.
But that other 10 to 20% of the time,
Mm-hmm.
that's where that stuff falls apart. As I've said, plenty of BJJ guys have been stabbed or shot coming out of the bar. And, what did it do for them?
Yeah. I love that, Josh, in the first one, he was talking about that because I asked as one of the questions. I think I actually had like 3 questions I didn't put in that list. It's kind of in the moment because he's a cage fighter.
Mm-hmm.
And I just asked him, so what would you say, having experienced real violence, is a difference to the rest of the MMA community? Because we've had this back and forth. And, there was a whole video, guy was very respectful, but was talking about it being the gold standard of hand-to-hand combat. And a lot of us were like, the fuck it is. Are you kidding me?
No. It's not. It's the gold standard of sport fighting.
Right. Yes. That, and acknowledging it, it's difficult. I think it's, as far as martial arts goes, it is the top, game of martial arts because it's, where you're actually going to get, bloody noses and broken bones. As far as martial arts goes, absolutely.
All the time. I have people come to me, I want you to teach my kids. And I'm like, no, That's not what I do. What you want to do is take your little Johnny and take him down to the BJJ school because that's going to protect him in the schoolyard. That's going to give him some discipline, good exercise, all of that wonderful stuff.
Right.
That's just not the side I deal with.
Right.
No.
Yeah, that's also why we're not rich, because I put a disclaimer on my site for the relaunch of 18 and up. And then I was looking at it, and because that's where the money comes from, is kids karate. We had a commercial dojo, and it was all about, you'd have a class 30, 40 kids, in that week.
Wonderful. It's wonderful for kids. And, that's where I started.
Right. Yeah, me too. Yeah.
But there comes a point, for some people, it's something they did and it was fun and it was a social activity, no different than being in a high school band or being on the football team or whatever.
Absolutely.
For some people, it's a social thing. I like to go to the gym, work out with my buddies,
Yeah, of course.
And, some people say, I want to know how to destroy another human being should I ever have to.
Right. So that's what Josh was saying was the fear. As he said, the fear of, it's not just the fear of unknown and a real attack. He said, worst thing that happens in the cage is I lose. And maybe, I lose in front of a whole bunch of people. But that level of fear is a little different.
Stop it. You have
and there was a referee and then judges and all that. And I think it's not, and he touched on a few things there. It was all excellent points. I think it's not just in the one section and thing I pointed out was he had his wife inside. She was still behind a closed door, thank goodness. But if I'm out with my family and this guy takes me, and that's one of the things I like to tell a lot of students is you understand we're still takeable. I don't care if you think I'm some badass or not. They could kill me.
Oh yeah.
And then now who's here to stop the wife, be carrying too, because she'd be getting shots off if he does. But, you had your family there. That's a whole different level of fear of he takes me out, what's he doing to them when I'm gone?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's, I would pray for an MMA fight at that point.
Yeah, no kidding.
Totally different things. And so hard with so much of this. I say it all the time on social media. I think that society presents with Dunning-Kruger so bad with this one thing. It's just they all really believe that they know because of commercialization and movies and TVs. Are there any other parts that you think that they get it from? Is it like just schoolyard mentality or?
Well, I mean, here's the thing. I don't even want to call it Dunning-Kruger because they are, especially when it comes to men, from a very young age, they're told they have to be a certain way.
Right.
So yep. They will say they are a certain way because maybe, they gave a kid a bloody nose once, in fifth grade or they feel that they have to present this way, that they have to act this way, that a lot of peacocking, a lot of pride. But there's also a lot of fear. And I see this on the comments on the videos I put up. The constant, well, if you try to do that to me, I just shoot you. All right. Mm-hmm. Great. The old trope of, boards don't hit back. The list is legion. I can pull up Facebook off one of the latest things I did that went viral, and it's just like, oh my God. But and also just a misunderstanding of how horrible an edged weapon can be, and conversely, how surprisingly resilient the human body is when you shoot it.
Yeah.
How many people keep coming with 5, 6, 7 holes in them, and
Absolutely.
The TV gives these ideas that a knife is going to give you a little red line on your body, and you're going to be like, oh, and then you're going to fight, and then you're going to kiss the girl because you're the plucky hero. But every time people think that, all I'm thinking about is, when's the last time you sat down and had a steak for dinner? We are made of the exact same stuff that steak is. And think about how easily your dull ass kitchen knife from your drawer cuts through that steak.
Open.
Yeah,
that's an excellent point.
People have very unrealistic understandings of what violence is. They base their thoughts on violence from what they see on TV, what they hear on the news.
Right.
Their imaginations, but they have never experienced actual violence. They've never gone out there and done the things that require them to not only receive violence but perform violence. There's so much, and on one hand, I like to think that in a way this is really good.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
So many people's lives are so unsheltered that they can afford to have an unrealistic viewpoint of violence. That's just good things about our society as a whole.
That's a wonderful perspective to look at it through. So I know you probably hear me quote it all the time, because I can never quote it enough. I am, one of the biggest Rory Miller fans ever. Because it's so comprehensive. He just put it all out there, from facing violence to contact.
I really need to read those books one day.
Oh man! So have you seen? So the Meditations on Violence really blew him up. I don't know if you've seen that one. It's like the reason I always, because On Combat was really, really good too. But the reason I always quote Miller and I tell everybody go read everything Rory Miller ever wrote was because he put it all. He just put it all there. Mm-hmm. And it was like it was like I was listening to, my father growing up has always been my instructor to this day, still is. And it was like listening. I heard his voice when reading these things, and it was, because he was a CEO and my father wasn't, but Rory Miller was a CEO. And so he saw it. And, this is the guy, he was on SRT team. This is the guy who's going in there who is, they're dealing with the guys who were on PCP. He has one story with instructor Simon on TikTok where they were doing the bouncers of Oakland, and they were sitting going through their stories, and one where a guy was on PCP pulling bricks out of the wall of the prison cell with his fingers. And and those are the extreme ones, but that it just some of the best, most comprehensive place. And I always just mention it to people because if there was one place you could go and read, even in just Meditations on Violence alone, we made it required reading for our black belts, because that is where you will get the education very thoroughly right there. And I think a lot of us are martial artists, but we're also very critical of our martial arts training and what that should look like and who should be teaching, what. And
well, this loops me back to context and what are you studying martial arts for?
Right.
Why are you studying that martial art? Is it a hobby? Is it exercise? Is it a social thing? Are you serious about self-defense? Is it a sport? What are you doing? And it doesn't matter. None of them are wrong.
Right.
You just need to have an honest understanding of what you're doing.
Right. Yep.
And be brutally honest with yourself about it.
Right.
And if you're doing that, you're good to go.
Yeah. Absolutely. The context makes all the difference in the world. I tell people for the karate, I'm not staying and fighting. If I'm teaching a kid, to kick to the groin and grab, their shirt, pull them in and punch them and then run, the context was getting out now. It was escape. It wasn't, we're going to go even one round. We're not going to go any rounds. It was a kick, a grab, a punch, goodbye.
That's a big thing we talk about in both Medusa and Piper is egress, getting away. And what's interesting in this is that, I said when we started talking about this that, Piper's an ambush system. It was original, it's how they mug and kill people.
Right.
But because it's an ambush system, it has built into it getting away.
Yeah.
And when you apply that to a self-defense situation, it's exactly what you should be doing. You're not a battlefield soldier that has to terminate this guy.
Right. It's not exfil.
Yeah. No, you just want to get out of there.
Right.
Big part of this, you notice doing a lot of angulation off the sides of the target, when we're playing this game. The angulation is twofold. Number one, it takes us away from all their weapons. Because if I'm here, he can punch me with both hands, he can kick me with both legs. But if I'm here, now it's very, very limited as to what he can do.
Where he have his tools, that's right.
Yeah. But now also, not only have I hit him, I'm gone. I've left. I've escaped. And you can play with these ideas to where instead of this being the knife strike, and I'm gone. Not engaging this guy, not doing anything other than getting away. And that's such a big part of this. Medusa, we talk about shock, latch, and stab. But the other thing we talk about is each point in shock, latch, and stab is a checkpoint. Boom. Is the fight over? Is the fight over?
I love it.
Fight over.
Right.
That's our roadmap. Do we need to go further? Do we need to escalate the level of violence?
That's awesome.
So, and this is actually the same in Piper. There's a lot of deception involved in Piper. And a lot of things you'll see is like, all right, this shaking the knife thing. This is called the shimmer. All right. But it's a distraction technique because,
Right.
you know, some madman is in there shaking a knife at you.
Right.
You're tracking that knife.
Yep.
There comes the other hand. And that could be
Yep.
the end of the fight.
Right.
You
No,
could,
absolutely.
instead of stabbing him, hit him with the butt of the knife.
Right.
Because we do a lot of this motion.
Right.
We don't do a lot of grappling. We do this thing that's called the minor twirl. So if he goes to catch my arm to stop this, I'm just going to roll out of it. Simply roll around. Now I'm in this position. Boom. I'm in there. But because we're doing this, we can effectively use the butt of the knife. Yeah, so there are all these things we can learn from studying people who are professional at their job of hurting other people. I'm not saying we should be going out there and hurting people. What I'm saying is these people are the professionals.
Right.
And what works, works. If it doesn't work, it goes away.
Right.
And again, with that mentality of the best defense is a good offense, you learn to bring the fight to them. In the exact same way they're trying to bring it to you. With the same intensity, the same level of aggression. The only difference is you're legally justified in what you're doing because you are defending yourself. But the fight's the fight, and it doesn't change just because you're the one being attacked.
Yep. An excellent point. I love that. That's, you know, just, I think the biggest part I like to tell my students is it's a difference between learning how to defend yourself and then learning what violence is and how to become violent. And you should have the ability to become violent. Mm-hmm. Because, and like, I love that about the checking. So I want to look more into your systems there because it's freaking awesome. The checkpoint thing is fabulous, you know. But yes, we would love if you wrote a book. And of course, yes, I think, you know, looking at some of that stuff with Miller, his was a comprehensive set, but I'll tell you, nobody puts things quite like you do. Everybody is, you know, that individual set, and the way you relay everything for students to understand, I think is just fantastic. One
of the things I've always believed, and this is just to the instructors out there, if your student's not learning, it's your fault.
Well said. Yep.
We as instructors have to find a way to communicate that idea and that concept to that student. We cannot just be drones of our instructors on down the line. People think and process information differently.
Yep.
And as instructors, we need to find as many possible ways and exercises to express simple concepts to people so that we can find the right one to give to them. They're showing up. They're already doing half the work. So it's on you instructors to find better ways to teach the same things, because you never know who's going to need it explained one way as opposed to another.
Absolutely. And every one of them learn a little bit differently. Some things we can recycle, some things we can't. Some things just have to be. That's why I love what you said about that, and this being retrofitted to the person. I almost always find I have to do that with everybody, because you can't give a cookie cutter way to do this stuff. You live a different life in a different place than I do, and so does every other student. So the self-defense is going to look a little bit different from you. We just have all these commonalities, but even down to your body type, everyone's got a different body, a different weight, and a different height, and everything.
I have short arms. Although I am nowhere near as muscular as he is, I am proportionally built exactly like Mike Tyson. I have short arms, short legs, long torso. I study that man like you wouldn't believe, just because I see somebody who is one of the best at that sport in the world. It has my, proportions. So I pay attention to that. And that is one of the things that drew me to Piper, aside from all the other stuff. is the heavy, tight rotation, the way we're fighting inside, which is really great for people with short arms. So
Yeah. That's the way you want to do it anyway, too. I've never met an instructor who knew what they were doing in FMA and Kali who wasn't telling you keep it in, keep it tight. We're not doing these big elongated kung fu motions of like that's one thing for performative martial arts, but it's performative. The second that it's a real weapons fight, you get in there, you get small.
There is, in the Filipino martial arts, we categorize things as two distinct versions of FMA. We have entablado, which means for the stage. That's the demonstration. That's the big, flowy, all of that stuff. And then we have patayan. Patayan is a Tagalog word that means to turn off, like you turn off a light switch. But colloquially, it means to, turn somebody off.
There you go.
So, the difference between the flowy demonstrative art that is beauty and self-perfection and timing, and then Patayan is fighting, not dancing.
Right.
You can do both. Just be honest with what you're doing.
Absolutely. Very, very, very well put. Oh my goodness. We need a room full of people because that was phenomenal. Oh man, that was great. Thank you so much for that.
Happy to, man.
I'm gonna make sure we drop the socials there in the videos. I'm putting up on all those socials there across mine as well. But I've been lucky enough to have been having some conversations with Instructor Cannata before. We're working on a project right now. It's going to be coming out soon. We're very excited to get that going as well. It's super cool. We got a lot of good people, are involved and some very, very educational material that every time I sit and talk with him, I learn many new things. And I think that, people really to be paying attention to some of these instructors we're bringing out, especially Instructor Cannata. The amount of knowledge that he brings, it is seriously good stuff. And, especially as what he just said about, making sure that you're being honest with yourself. You're talking about self-defense. This is somebody you want to be listening to. You trust me, you want to be listening to the people who've experienced it and everything he says. You just take it, write it down, and read it and memorize it, and all day long. Just like we always say with Miller, and go read everything Rory Miller wrote. Go listen to everything that Ryan Cannata says on a video. And if he writes a book, or has already, I'm not sure. If he goes and writes anything, you go read that too.
Now, I have about 4 different books that I want to write. The problem is my process on these sorts of things is always, I'm mulling them, I'm building them in my head before anything ever touches paper. And I keep wanting to reorganize things, debate whether I want to expand it or make it smaller, because so much of this stuff, each individual topic could take volumes. And it's kind of hard to condense it all down into.
Right.
So I don't know if I'm ever going to get to that, but I'm going to try.
If you absolutely should, and please share it with us there if you do, because I will be promoting that for you across the board. So anyway, but the last question there for you, and I kind of already touched on it a little bit. If you could give the audience any invisible tool or armor that you would say, and it doesn't just have to be about this experience that you're talking about with your client there, but that they could take for them from your perspective as an instructor, what would it be?
Several things, really. Determine what your goals are for what you're doing. Is it self-defense? Is it sport? Is it socialization? None of them are wrong. Everything is what it is for you. Be honest about it, though. Just be honest. Because if you lie to yourself and you think you're doing self-defense and then you find yourself needing to do self-defense and you find out that what you're doing doesn't work, you're kind of hosed. The second thing, the big thing, be mature. Don't be stupid. don't think you are don't act like a 17-year-old young man with a head full of testosterone and no brains. Just because somebody calls you something, does something, says something, don't get involved in stupidity. Walk away. Just walk away. You're not defending your honor. You're just being an asshole if you're getting into fights over words.
No.
And finally, when it comes to it, do it with clinical ferocity. Do not half-ass it. Because when it comes down to it, and if you're truly defending yourself and defending your life, it's you or them. And you want to go home that night. So you do what it takes and you don't hesitate. But be damn sure you're right in your actions. That's what I'd say to everybody.
Remember, help is out there if you are grieving or having experienced any of the things that come with real violence.